Welcome to Medical Moments, sponsored by blackdoctor.org. My name is Dr. Keith Crawford. As you are well aware, there is lots of misinformation about COVID-19 in the Black community. Yet, the Black community is at the highest risk for being infected with the SARS-2 coronavirus and at highest risk of being hospitalized and even dying from the SARS-2 coronavirus infection. As a medical provider, I would like to give you information that can help you and your family stay informed and be safe. So we're going to talk today about coronavirus mutants. And I'm sure everyone has heard a lot about these mutant strains of the SARS-2 coronavirus. There is a strain in Great Britain. There's a strain in South Africa. There's a mutant strain in Brazil. There's a mutant strain in California. And people have a lot of questions. They want to know, are these mutants spread more easily? Do the vaccines work? Do the therapeutics that we have work against these mutant strains? So I'm going to try to answer some of those questions. And the first question probably is, what is a mutant? What is a mutation? Quite simply, a mutation is a change in the viral genetic material. This genetic material, just like our own genetic material, serves as an instruction guide or blueprint for how we make proteins. And these proteins for the SARS coronavirus form the structure of the virus or are involved in regulating the virus's activities. So a change in the proteins, through a mutation could lead to changes in the virus's activities or changes in the virus's structure. Now, what do I mean when I say the virus's activities? One example would be the transmissibility or the infectivity of the virus, how easily the virus spreads. We already know that many of these mutants are spread much more easily than the other virus. It could mean that once the virus infects the cells, it reproduces more quickly or at a higher level. It could mean that once a person is infected, the virus does more harm or more damage to a body. So those would be examples of activities. It could cause a change in the virus's structure. For example, if you think of the spike protein of the SARS coronavirus that our immune system recognizes. So a slight change in that protein could make it more difficult for the immune system to recognize the virus and launch an immune attack against the virus. Well, where do these mutations come from? Well, when the virus is reproducing in our cells, in our tissues, it has to make copies of its genetic material. Now, we, of course, have to make copies of our genetic material, which is DNA, but that process is very tightly controlled and make sure that the copies are exact. Viruses do not have these controls. For the SARS-2 coronavirus, which has RNA as its genetic material, it makes mistakes when it's copying its genetic material. So it's possible that during the reproduction, there are minor changes or mutations that occur, which could make some viruses slightly different from the others. Now, most of these changes or most of these mistakes don't have any effects, but sometimes they do. They could change the structure or change the activity of the virus. And that's what we're concerned about. The next big question is, do our vaccines protect against these mutations? There's some good news and some uncertainty. In some recent studies done in a laboratory, it looks as if people who have received the Pfizer vaccine have protection against the mutant that comes from Great Britain and also the mutant that comes from South Africa. So that's encouraging, but again, these are early experiments done in a laboratory. For some of the other vaccines, it seems as if the antibodies that are produced from those vaccines may be weaker against some of the strains, like the strain from South Africa or the strain from Brazil. But it's important to point out that these are laboratory studies. Now, it's possible that even if the antibodies are slightly weaker against some of these mutants, a person's body may be able to produce enough of the antibodies to overcome that deficiency. It's also important to understand that when a vaccine stimulates your immune system, there are other parts of the immune system besides antibodies that are important in protecting against the infection. So the bottom line is we really don't know. And what we see in the lab may or may not relate to what actually happens when people are vaccinated. So the only way we're going to really know is when we start seeing changes in individuals during vaccination. Now, this creates sort of a problem because it turns out that the countries that have most of the vaccine are countries like the US, like Canada, like Great Britain, like the European countries. The wealthier countries have essentially consumed almost all of the vaccine. So countries like Brazil or countries like South Africa are not able to get their people vaccinated. And this is a problem because now we cannot clearly evaluate how significant these mutants are on a clinical level. The other problem is if these disparities in vaccination continue, we're going to have more and more and more mutations occurring or developing. Now, the last thing I'll just comment on is the question, is there the potential or is there the likelihood that we're going to have to be vaccinated every year against the coronavirus like we do with influenza? Some scientists and some clinicians think that that is possible or that it is likely. But one thing that we have to understand is that these coronavirus vaccines are really innovations in biotechnology. So altering the vaccine to respond to other mutants or other variants or other things that come along is a little different, perhaps easier than it would be for some of the vaccines that we had before. But it's good that the pharmaceutical companies and scientists are looking at that possibility, and we're just going to have to wait and see. Finally, what we do know with certainty is that whatever mutant strain that pops up, masks work. Social distancing works. These are true and tested strategies that we can always use to reduce our risk and protect ourselves. So hopefully this video has provided you some more information and more insight. Stay tuned because the story may change as we get more and more information coming on. Thank you for listening. Visit blackdoctor.org website to read more articles on COVID-19. Thank you.